So we're going to be hacking a web server. But first, what is a web server? Well, let me tell you. A web server is a combination of hardware and software that stores, processes, and delivers web content to users over the internet using the HTTP or HTTPS protocol. When a user's web browser sends a request, such as visiting a website, the web server responds by delivering the appropriate resources, including HTML pages, images, videos, or data. There are some common deployment methods when deploying a web service. You can do a manual deployment, which is suitable for small projects or teams, and you're utilizing tools like FTP and SSH. You can automate your deployment using tools like Git, Jenkins, or Circle CI, which is ideal for larger projects or teams. You can even use containerization technologies such as Docker, where you can maintain consistency across multiple environments with one deployment. And then you have Platform as a Service, PaaS, where you utilize services like Heroku, AWS Elastic Beanstalk, or Google App Engine. There are some common web server stacks, such as your LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. You have LAMP, which is Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. And then Me, where it's MongoDB, Express.js, and Angular. And then the variations of Mern and Maven, which use React or Vue.js respectively. Pern, which is PostgreSQL. Express.js, React, and Node.js. WAMP, where you're using Windows. Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And then XAMPP, which is cross-platform, using Apache, MariaDB, and MySQL, PHP, and Perl. We have a couple hacks or cybersecurity incidents that have happened over the years, starting with the Morris worm in 1988, where Robert Tappan Morris, a 23-year-old graduate student at Cornell University, released the first widely recognized computer worm which exploited vulnerabilities in Unix systems. We have Mafia Boy DDoS attacks from the 2000s, where Michael Kals, alias Mafia Boy, who was a 15-year-old from Montreal, Quebec, he conducted a series of distributed denial of services against major websites, including Yahoo, CNN, Amazon, eBay, and Dell. There's Operation Aurora from 2009, where a cyber espionage group linked to China's Elderwood Group, associated with the People's Liberation of Army, had a series of cyber attacks targeting intellectual property and Gmail accounts of Chinese human rights activists. There's the Equifax data breach from 2017, where 4 members of China's People's Liberation of Army, as indicated by the US Department of Justice, released a massive data breach compromising personal information from approximately 147.9 million. Now, these incidents demonstrate the evolving nature of cyber threats and the necessity for vigilant cybersecurity measures. There are a variety of techniques that you can employ in order to exploit vulnerable web servers. It can be a denial of service or a distributive denial of service, where you use tools like Slowlaris or low orbital ion cannon to conduct a stress test or a DDoS attack against a vulnerable web server. You can even do DNS hijacking, where you're redirecting traffic from legitimate servers to malicious ones by altering DNS records. And you can use tools such as msfvenom or Metasploit framework. Directory traversal is a great tool to use, where you exploit inefficient security validations to access files and directories outside the web root folder. And tools like Nikto or Burp Suite can be employed to do so. You can even do remote code execution, or RCE, where remote code execution vulnerabilities allow you to execute arbitrary code on a server. Tools at your disposal are Metasploit framework or ExploitDB. And even web shells, where malicious scripts are uploaded to the server to gain remote control. You can use Weebly or China Chopper for that. If you're utilizing an attack box such as Kali Linux or Parrot Security OS, you got some tools at your fingertips like Metasploit Framework, which is a comprehensive platform for developing and executing exploit code against remote targets, or ExploitDB, which is a database of public exploits and corresponding vulnerable software. You also have Nmap, which is your network scanning tool used to discover hosts and services. Burp Suite, which is an integrated platform for performing security testing of web applications, and Nikto, a web server scanner that tests for dangerous files, outdated server software, and other issues. You also have Hydra, which is a parallelized login cracker supporting numerous protocols to attack. An Nginx Pwner, which is a tool designed to scan Nginx web servers for misconfigurations and vulnerabilities. Okay, so we start with our information gathering or reconnaissance step, where we're collecting data about the target server, such as IP address, domain names, and technologies used. And you can use tools such as Nmap, Whois, Multigo, and HTTrack for that step. Then we move into our scanning and enumeration phase, where we're identifying open port services and potential vulnerabilities. And you can use tools such as Nmap, Nikto, and Nasus for that. Then we're gaining our access. So the exploitation phase, where we exploit identified vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access. And we can use tools such as Metasploit Framework, SQL Map, or Burp Suite for this. And then we're maintaining our access, where we're installing backdoors or web shells to ensure persistent access. And you can use tools such as netcat, Weebly, and Metasploit's Meterpreter. And then we want to cover our tracks. So we're going to delete logs and other evidence to avoid detection. And we can use log cleaners, timestamp, and Metasploit's clear AV. And then post exploitation, where we use the compromised server to launch further attacks to exfiltrate data. So you can use Mimikatz, Bloodhound, or PowerShell Empire for this. So now we're moving on into our demonstration. We're going to be using Metasploitable 2 as our target system. And we're going to be targeting a vulnerability in FTP. So we're going to do an Nmap scan in order to identify potential hosts on our current network. And then we're going to scan our services and do some OS detection to identify the vulnerable services. So now that we've identified our vulnerable service, we're going to use MSF console, so the Metasploit framework, and we're going to search for an exploit to attack the service or VS FTP. And then we're going to try to establish a backdoor, so shell access, to that service. This is where we get into a couple more steps. So we've gained our shell access, but now we want to establish or upgrade to a meterpreter session in order to, well, maintain our access. So what we're going to do is we're going to generate a payload using msfvenom. And then we're going to host that payload with a custom or quick, simple Python 3 HTTP server. And within that shell, we're going to download that payload. We're going to change permission so we can execute it. And then we're going to run it as root. And then set up our multi-handler to get our reverse TCP connection. Once we've established that connection, we want to establish persistence using our SSH key persistence. So we're going to load that module and then set our session ID and a couple usernames for it. So now we're going to cover our tracks. We're going to do this by just writing empty files and changing the timestamps for those files so that it's harder to detect who we are and when we were accessing the system. So now it's time for us to get some information about the system that we've owned. So we want to get some system information, some username information, network information, and extract some credentials. And then we want to crack those credentials so that we have additional usernames and password combinations for future use or our lateral movement phase. So now it's time for us to pivot to other systems.